Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode here on the Learning Droid. Today guys, we're going to be looking at a piece I did for a colleague of mine. So this was a pre-finished box used for storing the pet's ashes. I removed some of the finish and then started trying to transfer the pattern across using a patterning bit and the walnut hollow machine. I adjusted the temperature a couple of times and adjusted the settings a couple of times. But as you'll see when I take this off, there was a slight problem. The varnish wasn't completely removed. Because the varnish wasn't completely removed, it didn't want to take up the pattern. I tried again just in the hopes that even though the varnish wasn't completely removed, I could get the pattern to transfer across reasonably cleanly. But unfortunately, as you'll see as we go in to look at it, the varnish completely stops the pattern adhering. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to take the varnish off a second time using a piece of sandpaper, and I had to try again. I've cut out the section where I take the varnish off with the sandpaper, but I'm pretty sure I left in the second patterning section. But as you can see, patterning is very simple. It's just making sure you heat up the paper evenly, making sure the ink becomes liquid again, or becomes semi-liquid, which is toner, of course, not ink-jetting. Ink-jetting is always liquid, and then dries. It won't become liquid again when it heats up. You want inkjet, you want laser toner, which becomes liquid when it's heated up. So Xerox or laser printer. There we go, it's been resanded to take off the end of the finish. Certain finishes will do this, certain finishes will stop the pattern from adhering, stop the pattern from transferring across properly, and all that will happen is the areas where the ink is will discolour, because the ink will slightly discolour the varnish that you've got under there. So always make sure that you're taking the varnish off completely. Then again, there's also the other issues of if you're burning varnish, you're releasing chemicals into the air that you don't know what they are. All in all, I'm not particularly satisfied with this project. It didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but we're using the wire tip Peter Charles machine for it, and we're using a blade tip for this one. So we're using a hammered spear tip. I start off with small strokes to create a hair effect and to shade as well. So lots and lots and lots of tiny strokes. This is sped up to about 10 speed. So you can imagine how slowly I'm actually moving, but lots and lots of little tiny strokes to give hair shape and hair angle. And I'm actually trying to do it in the way that the hair would fall on a dog, so downwards on the ears, then we've got up and inwards above the eyes, and we've got inwards across the bridge of the nose. And as you can see, it's just a slow process of putting in line after line after line to try and get the hair effect. Now unfortunately the shading and the different degrees of darkness kind of fell through on this, which is what I really didn't like about this project. It's one of the issues is I'm not a photorealistic pyrographer yet. I did warn the colleague who asked me to do this that I wasn't a photorealistic pyrographer and that I didn't think that it would come out the way they wanted it, but they were okay with it. They were okay with it. I was not satisfied with how it ended up looking, which is a pity, really. I used the base of the spear point to do the nose and the eyes to give less of a line but more of a shading effect. I went quite deep because the nose and eyes are quite dark and quite shiny, so I wanted to be quite a distinct burn. It's just a case of patience and working a little bit at a time. My hand looks like it's set to vibration mode there. what you get when you speed a hand up times 10 and you're making little movements. Hey look, there's my afro. So, one of the issues is, because this was a box, it was raised up. What I really should have done is I really should have built a frame around it so that I had somewhere to rest my hand. That would have actually given me a better base. It's something I have to keep in mind for next time, is that if I don't have the base, if I don't have the places around the outside of the pyrography to put my hands, then it's going to affect how good the pyrography turns out in the end. So building a frame around the base is going to be something important. Something that you should bear in mind with your own projects is if you're doing a project on a pre-built item, so pre-built box, pre-built thing like that, is try and get the pyrography surface as flat with where you're resting your hand as possible, as close to the same level as where you're resting your hand as possible, to give you the best surface for you to rest your arm and rest your hand, which is important for getting a good accurate burn. It's something I wasn't really aware of before I started doing this. I really should have stopped part way through, to be honest, because as you'll see in a bit, as I complete more of the burn, even at 10 times speed, this is taking ages. It took me about 4 or 4.5 hours, all told. There's me cleaning off my pyrography bit because it was getting clogged up with ash and carbon. But this is one of the things, is I really should have created a frame around this to rest my arm on, because it does make a significant difference with how good the final product of the final burn figures out, the final burn results. I would really like to do a huge project next, like a tabletop, but we'll see. I'd also like to do some flamethrower or some blowtorch pyrography later as well. Thousands and thousands of little lines. And I think this is the point where I actually start to make mistakes, in that I'm overshading areas as I'm putting the lines in. And because I'm overshading areas as I'm putting the lines in, I didn't really notice at the time that I was overshading areas while putting the lines in. You'd think it would be an obvious thing, but I didn't really notice I was overshading the areas when I was putting the lines in. And that's one of the major things that affects the quality of the burn at the end. So I think it probably would have been worth at points stepping back and taking a period, say a couple of minutes, half an hour away from the piece of work, so that I had a fresh point of view and could have seen when I came back that I was overshading. So when doing photorealistic work, a more sort of stop-start, more observing style, perhaps, so that you get a better look at what you're doing. Because of course, if you're burning and you're not really taking any breaks, you're not really looking accurately at what you're doing, which can lead, of course, to you making mistakes, which is what I did. Later projects that I'm really thinking about working on, as I said, I'd love to do some blowtorch pyrography. I'd love to do some inverted blowtorch pyrography, so I'd love to get a palette knife or a painter's knife and use the edges of the painter's knife to block the flame while doing some blowtorch pyrography, to try and do some inverted pyrography or some occluded pyrography to see what that's like to do. I think that'd be quite fascinating and quite fun to do. I'd also like to do some more attempts at photorealistic. This one didn't turn out very well, but I'd really love to sort of push towards some more attempts at photorealistic. I know I've had several people approach and say, can you do a pyrography of my girlfriend's face, or can you do a pyrography of my child? And I'm unfortunately having to constantly turn around and say, well, no, because I'm not that good. My colleague was quite sort of, with this one, she said she really wanted it, and she was okay if it didn't turn out perfectly. So I gave it a go, and unfortunately it didn't turn out anything like what I wanted it to turn out as. In the end, the muzzle ended up too short and the hairs ended up too even across the entire head, which robbed it of shape. There was no definition between the different areas on the head, which robbed the head and body of shape, and the muzzle ended up a bit short for the kind of dog that it was, which is entirely to do with my fault with the where it was burnt. You see me here trying to rescue it, trying to create angles during the shading on the muzzle to try and lengthen the muzzle, but it doesn't really work, because unfortunately just the way the pyrography came out and the way the pattern was transferred across the muzzle just ended up too short. And still putting in hairs and more hairs and more hairs. This is the issue with photorealistic. I think one of the problems I try to do with photorealistic is I try to go too realistic. Like with this one, I try to put individual hairs, whereas in fact a lot of the photorealistic stuff I've seen is actually very minimalist. They shade areas and they put in hairs around the edge of lines and things. They don't actually put in every individual line and piece of hair and things. So I think probably one of my issues is that in trying to be photorealistic, I tried to be too realistic, and there's my afro occluding the camera. This is one of the problems, guys, is when I'm filming I can't see the camera at all. I've tried with several different camera positions and things, and unfortunately this is what's happened when I've been focusing really hard. I've leant closer and closer to the piece of work, and unfortunately that's slightly occluded the camera. I do all the filming by myself, guys. It's done with a stationary camera set on a stick, and I try to get the best position I can for each filming. You may have noticed in recent filmings I've moved the camera down close to the piece. So I've tried to take from people's feedback that they want to be closer, they want to see the actual motion of the pyrography bit, and they want to see how the pyrography bit is forming the individual different kinds of lines and the different lines I'm doing. So I've done that. In this one it was a little bit higher up, a little bit further away, because I couldn't get close to the piece because of the shape of the piece and the position it was and how I had to position it on the table. I couldn't get close to the piece, so I had the camera quite high up above what I was doing, and unfortunately I can't see what the camera's seeing, and when I'm burning I do kind of get into the burn, so I end up leaning quite close to the piece. I'm sorry about that, guys. It's one of the things that happens. With my next video I'm going to try and be very close to the pyrography. One of the problems is with the design of camera I have. I was very limited budget and I went with a Kodak. It's almost shaped like a mobile phone, to be perfectly honest, and in a way it's a bit like a mobile phone with a camera on it, but it's designed for recording film instead of phoning people. And because of that I am limited with certain positions it can be in, and it is a certain length between it and the lens. With a proper camcorder the distance between the mount and the lens would be shorter height-wise, but longer lengthwise, and that might be better, but then of course it would be heavier, so I'd need to have a much better support arm. At the moment I'm just using essentially a selfie stick, but a selfie stick that is screwed into a normal tripod mount. If anyone's got any or knows any exceedingly cheap places to get a proper camera arm, so a proper multi-joint camera arm that I can put it on, then feel free to send me a message, guys. A multi-joint camera arm would make positioning it a lot easier, because at the moment I just have a base tripod with a 180 by 180 degree freedom head, and then a selfie stick with a 20-30 degree freedom head at the top. So I have to jury rig it into position, which of course gives me a limited number of positions I can film from. I think my positions have become slightly better because I've been working on getting it closer to the piece. While I was doing this I was in contact with the colleague it was for. Get out of the way, hair. Get out of the way, hair. Hair. Get out of the way. Thank you. Further. There we go. I was in contact with the person this was for. Originally they didn't want any text on it, any writing on it, but later on they changed their mind and we'll be putting some writing on there later on. But as you can see, I've done it with the spear point off the Peter Child's machine to give it the hair effect. Now, it was a very harsh and very rough piece. For the feel of it and the design of it, the lines were very harsh. So I switched over to a flow bit on the Walnut Hollow machine, and I just ran over the top of it with the flow bit at a low temperature, not to change the colour, but merely to smooth off the arches of the wood. It kept the lines of the hair, but it lowered the peaks and and sort of brought them closer to the trough, which made it was slightly less harsh, slightly less distinct hairs, and melded the hairs together slightly, which I thought was quite a nice effect. Unfortunately, it does shade slightly, and it's already a bit too dark and a bit too even in its shading, so this was probably a mistake because it actually lost some of its definition for shading when I did this, and it's not really got a lot of definition for shading already. As you can tell from the way I'm talking, it just really wasn't something I was proud of. It really wasn't something I was proud of. The flow bit's great for smoothing out edges and for dealing with pits and troughs and for smoothing out sharp lines and things. It's also great for shading and lining if you want to do a soft line. It can be a little bit hard to control because of the way it's rounded, but that's okay. We just finish off the flow bit piece. But as I said, if there's any of you who know a good cheap way to get access to a multi-joint arm, a multi-position camera arm, feel free to get in contact with me. Send me a message here on YouTube, give me a link to it, or just tell me its name. Say, this particular multi-angle camera arm is excellent, it's cheap and effective and can support nice heavy cameras, and I'll have a look at it, and if it's within my budget I will be buying it and using it to get a better camera angle. Now this is after I was told, good grief, look how fast my hand moves. This is after I was told about what text the person wanted, what writing the person wanted on it. They just gave me basically a block of text that they wanted on it, and I decided to split that text up into two sections and have one either side of the face. So the first section is, blessed to have you in our lives, a lovely, kind and beautiful dog. And I believe the other one was loved by all, yes. Now when it came to burning this, I decided to use the Walnut Hollow piece, I believe. This is me putting away the Peter Child's bit. Oh no, do I use Peter Child's bit? Yes, I do. I use a boot piece, also known as a hardpoint piece. So those are the ones that are folded back and over into the shape of a boot, sometimes called a straight edge piece. I've decided to use one of these, and actually this is a great example of what one of these is capable of doing when it comes to things like text. I love these pieces for doing text because of the angles and shapes that you get and the way you can control it doing text. So I use the point for curves, I use the base for straights. And as you can see, it's very similar to writing with a normal pen. You just have to be careful to adjust your hand position as you go to make sure you're burning with the right piece, the right part of the pyrography tip. And for those of you who are wondering, because of allergies I had when I was a child, I was allergic to crayons, which is what they gave us to learn to write. I hold my pen in a very strange way. and I hold my pen the same way when I'm writing with a normal pen. So if any of you wondered why my handwriting is god-awful, for those of you who've seen my handwriting, that is why. Because I instinctively hold it like that. I've tried to retrain myself, and to be honest, considering how much work I do on computers nowadays and how little work I do with an actual pen, the amount of effort it required to even start me thinking about changing my hand position when I was writing, it took months of effort just for me to consciously be, nope, I shouldn't hold it like that every time I picked up a pen. I was like, this is pointless for the amount of writing I actually do. I do very little handwriting nowadays. I do everything on computers. So, yeah, it's an odd hand position, and I do the same thing when I'm holding a pen. It's weird. There's a little bit of insight into my life. The temperature for this on the Peter Childs machine is about a 6, 7, but that's because it is quite a hard wood. It's I believe it's a beech wood box from the feel of it. I don't actually know exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was a beech wood box. And then we move on to the last little bit. It's a very good wire point bit to use for doing writing. It's quite comfortable, quite easy to use, and the different edges gives you a good base for doing writing. Especially this sort of italicized, almost calligraphic writing. When it comes to wire points, a lot of people say that a fine point is good for calligraphic writing. Personally, I've found fine points aren't good for calligraphic writing, because when you drag them against the direction of the double up, against the direction where the two are supporting each other, it bends very easily when it's hot, which leads to misshaping. Even if you're not putting a lot of pressure on, it will bend because it's hot and you're dragging it against the direction of support. With this style of piece, because of the way that it's shaped with the shoe piece or the boot piece, you can drag it sideways and it won't actually bend very easily. You have to put quite a bit of pressure on it even when it's hot for it to bend, which in my opinion gives you a better basis for calligraphic style writing, because in calligraphic style writing you are going sideways quite a lot and moving at odd angles. What I could have done with this piece to make it slightly easier, thinking about it, is rotated the actual box a lot more. The box stays very stationary in this, and it's one of the things I've said in my basic pyrography videos as well, is if you're going to be doing multiple different direction lines and things, rotating the piece is better than rotating your hand, and I've actually not done that in this, so that's something I have to keep an eye on later on. Other than that, the reason you haven't seen many videos from me, guys, I've been very busy with work. I work at a supported housing complex and we've been very busy lately. Very busy. And then when I've had time off, I've been just kind of crashing out because of the amount of effort and work I've been doing. I've just been crashing out and sort of not really had the energy and effort to do pyrography or do videos, because it actually takes probably a good 3 hours to do a video, to get all the editing done, to film, record, find music background for it, do all the video flipping and things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.